The cleaning lady heard a child screaming and couldn't simply walk away. She burst through the crowd of failed doctors and saved the girl with her grandmother's home remedy in a matter of seconds. What she didn't know was that the girl was the only heir of a Mafia boss, and now she couldn't leave until she discovered who was trying to finish the job. The crystal chandelier above the master bedroom swayed slightly, disturbed by the frantic movements of 12 people crowded around a single hospital bed. But this wasn't a hospital. This was the Romano estate. 15,000 square feet of marble floors, oil paintings worth millions, and secrets buried deep enough to never see the light of day. None of this mattered now. 8-year-old Sophia Romano was dying. Her small body convulsed violently against the silk sheets, her back arching abnormally, while foam accumulated at the corners of her mouth. Monitors beeped in chaotic rhythms, their sounds mixing with the urgent voices of doctors who had flown in from Switzerland, Japan, and Johns Hopkins. Epinephrine now, Dr. Patterson ordered abruptly, his hands trembling as he prepared another injection. He had performed surgeries on presidents. He had saved senators. But this child, this one fragile girl, was slipping through his fingers like water. Marco Romano stood at the foot of the bed, a mountain of a man in a custom-made suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. His knuckles were white around the bedpost, the wood creaking under his grip. At 40 years old, Marco had built an empire. He controlled half the city's ports. Owned judges had politicians in his pocket. Men feared him. Rival families didn't dare breathe his name without respect. But right now, watching his only daughter suffer, Marco Romano was just a father, helpless and drowning in terror. What's happening? His voice was dangerously quiet, the kind of quiet that came before storms. You said the treatment would work. Dr. Patterson didn't look up, too busy checking Sophia's vital signs. The seizures aren't responding to medication. Her body is rejecting everything. Then try something else. Marco's roar shook the room. A nurse flinched. 2 specialists exchanged worried glances. They had lost count of the treatments they'd tried in the past 3 weeks. Experimental drugs, cutting-edge procedures, ancient remedies. Nothing worked. In fact, Sophia only got worse. Mr. Romano. Dr. Patterson finally met his eyes, and Marco saw something there that made his blood freeze. Resignation. We've exhausted all options. Her organs are starting to fail. I don't think she'll make it through the night. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Marco's hand moved to his waist where his Glock rested, his fingers wrapped around the grip. Let me make something crystal clear, Doctor. If my daughter dies, you die. Each one of you in this room dies. Understood? It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Dr. Patterson's face went pale, but before he could respond, Sophia's monitor began to scream. The girl's eyes rolled back, her body going rigid. She's crashing. Get the defibrillator. The room exploded into chaos. Doctors shouted orders, nurses ran desperately, medical equipment clattered noisily, and through it all, Marco stood frozen, watching his daughter die in front of him. He had killed men, destroyed families, built his empire on blood and fear, but he couldn't save his own daughter. A knock on the door went unnoticed at first. Then another, more insistent. Not now, someone shouted. The door opened anyway, and Maria, the head of the kitchen staff, poked her head in nervously. Mr. Romano, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but get out. Marco's voice was thunder. Maria flinched but didn't leave. Sir, the herb delivery is here for tonight's dinner. She says she needs a signature or she can't leave. I don't give a damn about dinner. Marco turned on her, and Maria stumbled backward, but she had worked for the Romano family for 20 years. She knew when to push. I know, sir. I'm sorry. I'll send her away. I just thought... The chef ordered special herbs, medicinal ones, from that organic farm you approved last month for little Sophia's special meals. Something in those words made Marco pause. Medicinal herbs. They had tried everything else. Sophia's diet had been carefully controlled, supervised by nutritionists and specialists. Before he could respond, a woman's voice drifted from the hallway. Is everything okay? I heard shouting. Then came the sound that changed everything. Sophia screamed. A raw, agonizing sound that didn't belong to a child. It was the sound of pure suffering, and Claire Bennett, standing in the hallway with a crate of fresh herbs in her arms, felt that scream pierce straight through her chest. She didn't think, didn't hesitate. Claire had spent 32 years learning to mind her own business. As a single mother working 3 jobs just to keep her daughter fed, she had mastered the art of keeping her head down, deliver the packages, collect the signature, move on to the next stop. But that scream, that desperate dying sound, shattered something inside her. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. When you hear someone suffering, Claire, you help. That's what we do. That's who we are. Claire dropped the crate. She pushed past Maria, ignoring the shocked gasp. She burst through the bedroom door, and the scene before her froze her blood. The enormous room, the desperate doctors, the machines screaming warnings. And in the center of it all, a small girl dying on white sheets. Who the hell someone started? But Claire was already moving, her sneakers squeaking on the marble floor as she rushed to the bed. A doctor tried to block her, but she ducked under his arm with the agility of someone who had spent years dodging trouble. "Get her out of here, doctor," Patterson shouted. Claire didn't listen. She reached Sophia's side and placed her hands on the small chest, feeling the violent spasms racking her body. Her skin was burning. Her lips were blue. Her eyes stared at nothing. She had seen this before. Not in a hospital, not in any medical textbook, but 20 years ago in her grandmother's tiny kitchen when Claire's cousin almost died from... "Ma'am, you need to leave immediately." A security guard grabbed her shoulder. Claire spun around, and for the first time she locked eyes with Marco Romano. The Mafia boss stared at this stranger, this nobody in a delivery company polo shirt and worn jeans who had just barged into his daughter's room as if she belonged there. "Touch me again, and you'll regret it," Claire said calmly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "That girl doesn't have time for your protocols." Marco raised his hand, stopping the guard. Something in this woman's eyes, a fierce, desperate determination, made him hesitate. "You have 30 seconds, Marco said. "Then I put a bullet in your head." Claire turned back to Sophia. 30 seconds to save a dying child. 30 seconds to change everything. She rolled up her sleeves and went to work. Claire's hands moved with a certainty that surprised even herself. She had watched her grandmother do exactly this thing when Claire was 12 years old. Her cousin Danny had eaten something toxic, his body shutting down exactly like this girl's. The ambulance was 20 minutes away. Grandma Rose hadn't waited. "I need hot water, clean towels, and those herbs, the ones I just delivered, the rosemary, thyme, and dried lavender." Claire's voice cut through the chaos with unexpected authority. Nobody moved. Now she barked. Maria disappeared, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Dr. Patterson stepped forward, his face red with indignation. "Mr. Romano, this is insane. This woman has no medical training. She's going to kill your daughter." Marco's gun cleared its holster in one smooth motion, the barrel now pointed at the doctor's forehead. "My daughter is already dying. You said so yourself. So either she kills her or you did. At least she's trying something new." The doctor's mouth opened and closed like a fish. 19 seconds left. Marco said to Claire, his eyes never leaving the doctor. Claire pressed her fingers against Sophia's neck, finding the pulse points her grandmother had taught her. The girl's heart was racing erratically like a car engine misfiring. She applied pressure, gentle but firm, on specific spots along her throat and collarbone. "What are you doing?" a nurse whispered. "Her nervous system is in overdrive." Claire said, her fingers moving to new pressure points along Sophia's arms. "Everything's firing at once. I'm trying to reset it like rebooting a computer." It sounded crazy. It probably was crazy, but her grandmother's voice echoed in her head. "The body remembers how to heal itself, Claire. Sometimes it just needs a reminder." Maria burst back into the room, arms loaded with supplies. "I brought everything." Claire grabbed a towel and plunged it into the steaming water, then wrung it out partially. She scattered herbs across the hot cloth. Rosemary for circulation, thyme for the respiratory system, lavender for the nervous system. The sharp medicinal scent filled the room immediately. "This is medieval nonsense," Dr. Patterson protested, but his voice was weaker now. Claire folded the herbed cloth and pressed it against Sophia's chest right over her heart. Then she began rubbing slow, rhythmic circles that matched the pattern of a healthy heartbeat. Her other hand continued working the pressure points on her neck and arms. 1, 2, 3, in. She counted under her breath, her movements precise and deliberate. Sophia's body jerked violently. "She's making it worse," someone shouted, but Claire didn't stop. She had seen this before, too, the body fighting back before it surrendered to healing. She pressed harder, her circles becoming more insistent. 4, 5, 6, in. The monitors were still screaming. Sophia's face was still blue. Marco's finger tightened on the trigger. "Your time's up. 7, 8, 9, in." Claire's voice remained calm, even as sweat beaded on her forehead. Then between one heartbeat and the next, something shifted. Sophia's body went completely still. The room held its breath. For 3 eternal seconds, nothing happened. The monitors showed flat lines. The doctors looked at each other in horror. Claire kept rubbing, kept pressing, kept believing. And then Sophia gasped. It wasn't the desperate, drowning gasp of someone dying. It was the deep, shuddering breath of someone waking from a nightmare. Her back relaxed against the mattress. Her fingers unclenched. The blue tint began fading from her lips, replaced by the faintest hint of pink. The monitor started beeping in normal rhythm. "Steady, strong, alive." "Oh my God," a nurse whispered. Claire sagged with relief, her hands still on Sophia's chest, feeling her heartbeat stabilized under her palm. It was working. It was actually working. Dr. Patterson stumbled forward, checking the monitors with wide, disbelieving eyes. Her vitals are stabilizing, oxygen levels, rising, heart rate normalizing. This shouldn't, but it was. Sophia's eyes fluttered open, confused, frightened, but alive. She looked at Claire with the bewildered gaze of a child waking in a strange place. "It's okay, sweetheart," Claire whispered, her voice gentle now. "You're okay. Just breathe." The girl's small hand reached up and gripped Claire's wrist weakly, as if she were the only solid thing in a tilting world. Marco lowered his gun slowly, his face unreadable. He stared at his daughter breathing conscious alive, and then at the stranger who had just accomplished the impossible. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. "Everyone out." It wasn't a request. The doctors scrambled for the door, nearly tripping over each other in their haste to escape. Nurses grabbed equipment and fled. Maria hesitated only a moment before bowing her head and backing out of the room. Within seconds, the bedroom was empty except for 3 people, Marco, Claire, and the child she had just saved. Claire started to rise her legs, shaky from adrenaline. "I should go check on my delivery truck." "I left." "Sit down." Marco's voice stopped her cold. He moved around the bed like a predator, circling prey, his footsteps silent on the thick carpet. Then he crouched beside Claire, bringing his face level with hers. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the fear he'd been hiding, the dangerous edge of a man who had just watched his world nearly end. "Tell me who you are," Marco said, each word carefully measured. "Tell me how you just did what 1,000 doctors, specialists, and surgeons couldn't. And tell me the truth, because I'll know if you're lying." Claire met his gaze steadily, even though her heart was pounding. "My name is Claire Bennett. I'm a delivery driver. I work for Fresh Harvest Organics, and I was supposed to drop off herbs and get a signature. That's it. That's all I am. Nobody is just anything," Marco said. "Try again. I learned that technique from my grandmother Claire," continued, her voice stronger now. "She was an herbalist, grew up in a small town in Kentucky where doctors were 2 hours away. She had to learn how to heal people with what she had. She taught me before she died." Marco studied her face for a long moment, searching for deception. "You expect me to believe a delivery driver just happened to save my daughter's life with folk medicine?" "I don't expect you to believe anything," Claire replied quietly. "I just expect you to let me leave. Your daughter needs rest, and I have 12 more deliveries before my shift ends." Marco almost laughed. Almost. This woman had walked into a Mafia boss's mansion, saved his dying heir, and now wanted to finish her delivery route like nothing had happened. "You're not going anywhere," he said, and Claire realized her real problems were just beginning. Claire's fingers were still trembling when Marco pulled a chair directly in front of her, the legs scraping against the floor with an ominous sound. He sat down, slowly, deliberately, his eyes never leaving her face. "Let's start simple," he said. "Where are you from?" "Detroit. Born and raised." Claire forced herself to hold his gaze, even though every instinct screamed at her to look away. "Moved here 3 years ago after my divorce. Family. A daughter, Rachel. She's 7. Claire's voice caught slightly. "She's at after-school care right now, waiting for me to pick her up. So you're telling me a single mother from Detroit working as a delivery driver just happens to know ancient healing techniques that stumped the best medical minds in the world? It's not ancient, it's just forgotten." Claire wiped her palms on her jeans. "My grandmother was born in 1940. Back then, people in rural areas had to figure things out themselves. She learned from her mother, who learned from hers. It was survival, not magic. Convenient story. It's the truth." Claire's voice hardened slightly. "Look, I understand you live in a world where everyone has an angle. Everyone wants something. But I literally stumbled into this room because I heard a child screaming. That's it. I'm not a spy, not a rival family plant, not anything except someone who couldn't walk away." Marco leaned back, studying her. In his line of work, he'd learned to read people. Liars had tells, shifting eyes, nervous tick stories that were too perfect. This woman was terrified, yes, but her fear felt genuine, raw. Behind him, Sophia stirred slightly, making a small sound. Claire's attention immediately shifted to the girl, her whole body angling toward her protectively. That reaction, that unconscious maternal instinct, was harder to fake. "Can I check on her?" Claire asked. Marco nodded once. Claire moved to Sophia's bedside, her movements gentle as she checked her forehead for fever. The girl's eyes were closed now, her breathing steady but shallow. She pulled back Sophia's upper lip, carefully examining her gums, then tilted her head slightly to look at her tongue. Her brow furrowed. "What?" Marco was beside her in an instant. "Her tongue," Claire said quietly. "See that discoloration? The slight greenish tint around the edges." Marco looked. He had seen his daughter examined by dozens of doctors, but none of them had mentioned anything about her tongue. Then again, they'd been so focused on the seizures, the organ failure, the immediate crisis. "What does it mean?" Claire bit her lip, thinking. "When my cousin got sick, his tongue looked like this. Grandma said it meant something toxic was in his system, not an illness, a poison." The word hung in the air like a knife. "Poison," Marco repeated, his voice flat. "I could be wrong," Claire added quickly. "I'm not a doctor, but the symptoms, the way she seizes, the way her body rejects every treatment, it doesn't feel like a disease. It feels like her body is fighting something that keeps getting reintroduced." Marco's jaw clenched. "So someone—" Claire heard his teeth grind. "Keep talking. You said the doctors have been treating her for 3 weeks. When Marco nodded, Claire continued, "Has there been any pattern, any consistency to when the seizures happen?" "They're random. Morning, night, afternoon." Marco stopped, his eyes narrowed. "Wait, no. They always happen within an hour after meals, every single time." Claire's stomach dropped. "That's not random." She watched Marco's expression change, saw the moment understanding crashed over him like a tidal wave. This wasn't some mysterious illness. This wasn't bad luck or God's punishment or any of the things he'd been telling himself at night. Someone was poisoning his daughter, someone in his house, someone with access to Sophia's meals, someone who'd looked him in the eye for 3 weeks while slowly murdering his child. "Who prepares her food?" Claire asked gently. "The kitchen staff, head chef Mario. 2 assistants, but every meal is supervised." Marco's hands curled into fists. "Salvatore oversees all household operations. He personally approves everyone on rotation near Sophia. He checks every ingredient, every—" He stopped mid-sentence. Claire saw something terrible flash across his face. Not just anger, something deeper, a betrayal so profound it physically hurt. "Salvatore," Marco whispered. "He's my right hand, my oldest friend. We grew up together. He's Sophia's godfather." "I'm sorry," Claire said, and she meant it. She knew what betrayal felt like. Her ex-husband had cleaned out their bank account and disappeared with his secretary. But that was money. This was a child's life. Marco stood abruptly, pulling out his phone. His thumb hovered over the screen. Then he stopped. "Put it away." "If I'm right," he said slowly, "and Salvatore discovers I know, Sofia becomes a liability. He'll finish the job before I can act." He turned to Claire. "You're sure about this?" "No," Claire admitted. "I'm a delivery driver who learned folk medicine from her grandmother, but those doctors couldn't figure it out in 3 weeks. Sometimes the simplest answer is the right one." Marco looked at his daughter, small, fragile, innocent, and something murderous settled in his eyes. "If someone in my organization is trying to kill my heir," he said quietly, "they're declaring war on me, and I don't lose wars." He turned back to Claire, and she saw the full weight of who he really was. Not a desperate father, a mafia boss. "You're staying here," Marco said. "You keep Sofia alive and you help me find proof. You do that and I'll make sure you and your daughter are protected for life. And if I refuse—" Marco's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You're a smart woman, Claire. You know there's no refusing. You walked into my world the moment you walked through that door. The only question now is whether you survive it." Claire thought of Rachel waiting at after-school care. Rachel, who needed her mother to come home. "I'll need to call my daughter," Claire said. "Tell her I'll be late." "Of course," Marco said, "right after you help me catch a traitor." The guest room Marco assigned to Claire was bigger than her entire apartment. Silk curtains framed floor-to-ceiling windows. A king-sized bed sat in the center, looking untouched and expensive. Oil paintings lined the walls, probably originals worth more than she'd earned in 10 years. Claire ignored all of it. She stood by the window phone, pressed to her ear, listening to her daughter's voice on the other end. "Mommy, when are you coming?" Rachel's voice was small, worried. "I'm so sorry, baby. I got held up at work. Mrs. Chen is going to take you home tonight and stay with you, okay?" Claire had called her neighbor, practically begging. Mrs. Chen had agreed, God bless her, "But you promised we'd make cookies tonight." Claire's throat tightened. I know I did. "And we will, I promise. Just not tonight. Tomorrow, okay? I'll make it up to you." "Okay," Rachel said, but Claire could hear the disappointment. After she hung up, Claire stood there for a long moment, staring at her phone. What was she doing? She should grab her keys, walk out that door, and never look back. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Sofia's small face, that terrified look when she'd woken up, the way her tiny hand had gripped Claire's wrist. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," Claire called. Marco entered, followed by a man Claire hadn't seen before. He was shorter than Marco, stocky, with a boxer's build and a face that had seen too many fights. His dark eyes swept over Claire with open suspicion. "This is Salvatore Moretti," Marco said. "My second-in-command, Salvatore, this is Claire Bennett. She saved Sofia's life." Salvatore's expression didn't change. "So I heard, quite the miracle." Something in his tone made Claire's skin crawl. Not gratitude, not relief, something else entirely. "Just luck," Claire said carefully. "Right place, right time. Funny kind of luck." Salvatore crossed his arms. "You just happened to know exactly what to do when 12 trained doctors couldn't figure it out." "Salvatore." Marco's voice carried a warning. "I'm just saying, boss, it's suspicious. She shows up and suddenly everything's fine. In our line of work, we don't believe in coincidences." Claire met his gaze steadily. "You're right not to trust me. I'm a stranger. But your boss's daughter was dying and now she's not. Maybe focus on that part." Salvatore's jaw tightened. For a moment Claire thought he might actually argue, but then he glanced at Marco and backed off. "I've arranged for Claire to have access to the kitchen areas," Marco said. "She'll be observing meal preparations for Sofia, making sure everything is appropriate." The way Salvatore's face hardened told Claire everything she needed to know. He didn't like this, didn't like her, and definitely didn't like someone new having access to his carefully controlled domain. "Is that really necessary?" Salvatore asked. "We already have protocols." "The protocols failed." Marco's voice could have cut glass. "My daughter almost died under your watch, Salvatore. So yes, it's necessary. The two men stared at each other, and Claire felt the tension crackling between them. Years of friendship colliding with suspicion and blame. "Fine," Salvatore finally said. "I'll inform the staff." He turned to Claire. "Stay out of my way." After he left, Marco moved to the window looking out over the estate grounds. "He's been with me for 15 years, saved my life twice, stood beside me when everyone else ran. And now you think he's trying to kill your daughter?" Claire said quietly. "I don't know what to think." Marco's voice was tired. "But I need to know the truth, and I need you to help me find it." He turned around, pulling an envelope from his jacket. "There's $50,000 in here. Down payment. Help me catch whoever's doing this, and you'll get 10 times that plus protection for you and your daughter. New identities if you want them. A house, whatever you need." Claire stared at the envelope. $50,000. That was Rachel's college fund. That was security. That was everything they needed. She didn't take it. "I don't want your money," Claire said. Marco's eyebrows rose. "Everyone wants money. I want your daughter to be safe. That's it." Claire's voice was firm. "I'm not doing this for money or protection or anything else. I'm doing it because a child is being hurt and I can help stop it." For the first time since they'd met, Marco smiled a real smile, not the dangerous ones he'd been using. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the dumbest." "Probably both," Claire admitted. Marco put the envelope away and walked to the door. Then he stopped his hand on the frame. "Let me make something clear, Claire. This isn't a negotiation. You're not a guest. You're not an employee." He looked back at her, and his eyes were cold again. "You're mine until this is over. You find me the person who did this, and I'll let you walk free. You fail, or you try to run, and there won't be anywhere far enough for you to hide. We clear?" Claire felt the weight of his words settle over her like chains. "Crystal clear," she said. "Good. Kitchen duty starts at 5 a.m. tomorrow. Salvatore will show you the ropes." Marco paused. "And Claire trusts no one. Not the staff, not the guards. In this house, everyone has secrets, and some of those secrets are deadly." After he left, Claire sat on the edge of the massive bed, her head in her hands. What had she gotten herself into? Her phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen with a photo of Rachel safely tucked into bed, holding her favorite stuffed rabbit. Claire saved the photo and held the phone close to her chest. Just find the proof, she whispered to herself. Find the proof and go home. But deep down, she knew it wouldn't be that simple. It never was. The kitchen at 5 a.m. was a different world. Claire stood in the corner watching Chef Mario and his team move through their morning routine with military precision. Everything was labeled, organized, accounted for. Every ingredient went through Salvatore's approval. Every meal was documented. It all looked perfect. Too perfect. "You're the miracle worker, huh?" Chef Mario said, glancing at Claire while he chopped vegetables. He was a small man with quick hands and suspicious eyes, the one who saved the girl. "I just got lucky," Claire said, keeping her voice neutral. "Luck?" Mario snorted. "In this house there's no such thing." Claire spent 3 days watching, taking mental notes, learning the patterns. Salvatore's men delivered supplies every morning at 6. The same 2 guys, Tommy and Victor. They wore gloves, handled everything with care, logged every item in a leather-bound book. The kitchen staff rotated, but certain people always prepared Sophia's meals, always the same protocols, always supervised. And yet somehow poison was getting through. Claire's breakthrough came from an unexpected source. On the 4th day, Marco brought Sophia downstairs. The girl had been improving steadily, growing stronger each day. She still looked pale and fragile, but her eyes were brighter now. "Sophia wants to thank you." Marco set his hand protectively on his daughter's shoulder. The girl stepped forward shyly, holding a crayon drawing. It showed 2 stick figures, a small one and a taller one with yellow hair. "That's you," Sophia said softly, pointing to the yellow-haired figure. "You saved me." Claire's heart melted. She knelt down to her level. "That's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever given me." "Thank you, Sophia. Can you stay?" The girl's voice was barely a whisper. "Everyone else pokes me with needles. You just make things better." "I'm staying as long as you need me," Claire promised, brushing her dark hair back from her forehead. From that moment, Sophia attached herself to Claire like a shadow. She followed Claire around the kitchen asking questions, telling her stories about her favorite cartoon characters. When mealtimes came, she refused to eat unless Claire tasted the food first. Marco allowed it, maybe because it kept his daughter calm, maybe because he was testing Claire's loyalty. One afternoon, while Claire was helping prepare Sophia's lunch, the boy tugged on her sleeve. Claire. Her voice was small. Sometimes the food smells funny. Claire's hand stilled. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Sophia looked around nervously, making sure no one was listening. "Not all the time, just sometimes, like when Uncle Salvatore brings me special treats. They smell like the medicine Daddy gives me, the bitter kind." Claire's pulse quickened. "When does Uncle Salvatore bring you treats?" "Mostly after dinner. He says they're vitamins to make me strong." Sophia's eyes filled with confusion, "But they make my tummy hurt." Claire forced herself to stay calm, to keep her voice gentle. "Can you tell me what they look like? Little brown squares, like chocolate but not chocolate." Sophia wrinkled her nose. "I don't like them, but Uncle Salvatore says I have to eat them or I'll disappoint Daddy." Claire's mind raced. Salvatore was giving Sophia something directly bypassing all the kitchen protocols, something disguised as treats. "Sophia, this is very important," Claire said quietly. "Don't eat anything Uncle Salvatore gives you anymore. Okay? If he asks, why tell him your stomach still hurts? Can you do that for me?" The girl nodded solemnly. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Claire crept back to the kitchen. The mansion was different in darkness. Shadows stretched longer. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like thunder. Claire's heart hammered as she used the keycard Marco had given her to access the kitchen. She'd watched Salvatore's routine carefully. Every night he personally checked certain supplies. One cabinet in particular, always locked, always handled by him alone. Claire had stolen the key from his office that afternoon, her hands shaking the entire time. Now, standing in the dark kitchen with only a small flashlight, she inserted the key into the locked cabinet. It opened with a soft click. Inside were containers of supplements, vitamins, and specialty ingredients for Sophia's specific dietary needs. Claire examined each one carefully, holding them up to the light, smelling them, looking for anything unusual. Then she found it. A jar labeled organic cacao powder for little Sophia's smoothies. But when Claire opened it and smelled the contents, her stomach dropped. It didn't smell like chocolate. It smelled medicinal, sharp, wrong. She dipped a spoon into the powder and examined it under the flashlight. Among the brown cacao, there were tiny specks of something else. Something greenish, something that didn't belong. Claire pulled out her phone and took several photos. Then she carefully sealed the jar and put everything back exactly as she'd found it. She was closing the cabinet when she heard footsteps. Claire froze, her blood turning to ice. The footsteps were getting closer, heavy, deliberate. She turned off her flashlight and pressed herself against the wall, barely breathing. Through the kitchen doorway she saw a shadow pass. Someone was patrolling, checking. The footsteps paused right outside the kitchen. Claire's hand found a knife on the counter. She gripped it tightly, her palms sweating. The door handle turned slowly, then a voice in the distance. "Salvatore, boss wants you upstairs." The footsteps retreated. Claire waited 10 agonizing minutes before she dared to move. When she finally slipped out of the kitchen and back to her room, her legs were shaking so badly she could barely walk. She locked her door and sat on the bed, staring at the photos on her phone. She had proof, real tangible proof, that Salvatore was poisoning Sophia. But now came the dangerous part, telling Marco, without Salvatore finding out first. Because if Salvatore discovered what she knew, Claire understood with perfect clarity that she would disappear. They'd find her body in the river, or they wouldn't find her at all. She looked at her phone again, at Rachel's picture, her daughter's innocent smile. "I'm sorry, baby," Claire whispered. "Mummy might have made a terrible mistake." Outside her window, she saw Salvatore standing in the courtyard, phone pressed to his ear, his expression cold and calculating. And somehow, Claire knew he was already suspicious. The clock was ticking. Claire had 72 hours to figure out how to expose Salvatore without getting herself killed. The problem was simple. She couldn't just show Marco the photos and the contaminated cacao powder. Salvatore would deny everything, claim someone was framing him, maybe even suggest Claire planted the evidence herself. In a world built on loyalty and paranoia, her word meant nothing against a man who'd stood beside Marco for 15 years. She needed something undeniable, something public, something that would make Salvatore condemn himself. The opportunity came on the 5th day. "We're having a celebration dinner tonight," Marco announced at breakfast. Sofia sitting beside him eating scrambled eggs, the girl's recovery, family and inner circle only. Salvatore looked up sharply. "Is that wise? Sofia is still weak." "Sofia's strong enough," Marco said, ruffling his daughter's hair. "And it's time to show everyone that the Romano family doesn't break. We survive. We thrive." He looked at Claire. "You'll join us?" "Of course. You're the reason we're celebrating." Claire's mind raced. A family dinner. Everyone gathered. Salvatore would be there along with Marco's most trusted men, the capos, the enforcers, the ones who controlled the family's operations. "I'd be honored," Claire said. Salvatore's eyes narrowed slightly, watching her. Claire spent the afternoon in the kitchen, ostensibly helping prepare the meal. But her real focus was on something entirely different. She told Chef Mario she wanted to create a special toast, a traditional herbal drink her grandmother used to make for celebrations. Mario, impressed by her knowledge, gave her free rein in the kitchen. Claire worked carefully, preparing individual glasses for each dinner guest. Most contained simple ingredients: honey, herbs, lemon, a touch of brandy, harmless, pleasant. But for Salvatore's glass, she added something different. She'd raided the medicine cabinet in her room, crushing up tablets that would cause temporary symptoms, rapid heartbeats, sweating, muscle spasms. Nothing dangerous, nothing permanent, but enough to mimic what Sofia had endured. Then she added a tiny amount of the contaminated cacao powder from Salvatore's locked cabinet. Just enough to make his tongue show the same greenish discoloration Sofia had displayed. It was a gamble, a huge, terrifying gamble. If she was wrong about Salvatore, she just poisoned an innocent man. If she was right, but the plan failed, Salvatore would know she was onto him. Either way, tonight would end badly for someone. The dining room was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over a table set with china that probably cost more than Claire's car. 12 men in expensive suits took their seats. Marco at the head, Sofia beside him in a booster seat, and Salvatore directly across from Marco, in the position of honor. Claire was seated further down between two capos, who eyed her with curiosity and suspicion. "Gentlemen," Marco raised his wine glass. "3 weeks ago I thought I'd lost everything. My daughter was dying, and the best doctors in the world couldn't save her. Then this woman," he gestured to Claire, "walked into my home and did the impossible." Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. Some men nodded respectfully at Claire. Others looked skeptical. "To Sofia's health," Marco continued, "and to second chances." Everyone raised their wine glasses and drank. Claire caught Chef Mario's eye and gave a small nod. Mario stepped forward with a tray of small glasses, each containing Claire's special toast drink. A traditional family blessing, he announced, prepared by Miss Bennet in honor of little Sofia's recovery. The glasses were distributed. Claire watched carefully as Salvatore received his, the one with a slightly darker color, imperceptible unless you knew to look for it. Salvatore raised an eyebrow at her. "You made this an old family recipe," Claire said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "My grandmother said it brings protection and reveals truth." Something flickered in Salvatore's eyes. Suspicion, fear, but he couldn't refuse. Not without insulting Marco, not without drawing attention. Marco stood again, holding his small glass. "To family, to loyalty, to the blood we shed and the bonds we keep. To family," the men echoed. Everyone drank. Claire counted in her head. The tablets would take 3 to 5 minutes to work. She timed it carefully. Conversation flowed around the table. Stories were told. Sofia laughed at something one of the capos said. For a moment it almost felt normal. Then Salvatore's hand trembled. He set down his glass quickly, but Claire had seen it. So had the man beside him. "You all right, Salvatore?" the capo asked. "I'm fine," Salvatore said, but his voice was strained. Sweat beaded on his forehead. 30 seconds later, his face went pale. "Salvatore." Marco leaned forward, concern creasing his face. "I don't feel—" Salvatore gasped, his hand going to his chest. His body jerked violently, exactly like Sofia had done. The glass fell from his hand, shattering on the expensive floor. Salvatore collapsed sideways, his chair tipping over as convulsions racked his body. The dining room erupted in chaos. Men jumped to their feet. Someone shouted for a doctor. Marco was around the table in seconds, kneeling beside his oldest friend. "Salvatore, what's happening?" Marco's voice was raw with panic. Claire stood up slowly, her legs steady now. This was the moment, the point of no return. "This is what Sofia endured," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Every day, every meal, every seizure that nearly killed her." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Claire. "What are you saying?" one of the capos demanded. Claire walked to where Salvatore lay, gasping on the floor. She knelt and carefully pulled back his upper lip. "Look at his tongue," she said. "See that greenish discoloration? That's not from my drink. It's from the same poison that was killing Sofia. The poison only one person had exclusive access to deliver." Marco stared at Salvatore's tongue, then at Claire. Understanding crashed over his face like a wave. "The special treats," Marco whispered. "The vitamins you gave her." Salvatore's eyes widened with realization. He tried to speak, but his body was still convulsing. Claire pulled out her phone and showed Marco the photos of the locked cabinet. "I found these 3 nights ago. The cacao powder contaminated with toxins, the same powder Salvatore used to make treats for Sofia." "You set me up," Salvatore gasped between convulsions. "You poisoned me with a harmless substance that mimics symptoms," Claire interrupted. "You'll be fine in 20 minutes, unlike Sofia, who suffered for 3 weeks while you slowly murdered her." Salvatore's face twisted with rage and fear. "She's lying. She's trying to frame me. Boss, you can't believe." But Marco wasn't listening. He was staring at his oldest friend with an expression of pure, cold betrayal. "Why?" Marco's voice was barely a whisper. And in that moment, everyone knew the truth. Salvatore was guilty. For 3 seconds, no one moved. Salvatore lay on the floor, his convulsions starting to subside, but his eyes were wild with the trapped desperation of a man who knew his life was over. Marco stood over him, face carved from stone, waiting for an answer that could never justify what had been done. "Why?" Marco asked again, his voice dangerously soft. Salvatore's jaw worked. Then something shifted in his expression, resignation turning to anger. "If he was going down, he wouldn't go down alone. Because you were weak." Salvatore snarled, his voice gaining strength even as his body trembled. "Your father built this empire on fear and blood. And you went soft, caring about civilians, worrying about heat from the feds, putting your daughter above the family business." "Sofia is family," Marco said. "Sofia was the problem." Salvatore pushed himself up with a jerk, staggering but standing. The other capos instinctively reached for their weapons. With her gone, you would have remembered who you really are. You would have become the boss this family needs. "So you decided to murder a child," Claire said, her voice cutting like a blade. "An 8-year-old girl." Salvatore's eyes snapped to her, and the hatred there was pure and absolute. "This is your fault. You should have stayed in your delivery truck, but you had to play hero. Had to." He moved with surprising speed for someone who'd just been convulsing. His hand went to the ankle holster, pulling a small pistol Claire hadn't known was there. But he didn't point it at Marco. He pointed it at Claire. "You ruined everything," Salvatore screamed. The gunshot exploded through the dining room, but Claire felt no pain. Marco had moved faster than seemed possible, knocking Salvatore sideways. The bullet whizzed past, wide, shattering a window behind Claire's head. The 2 men crashed into the dining table, sending plates and glasses flying in all directions. Sophia screamed Claire, spinning toward the girl. Sophia sat frozen in her chair, eyes wide with terror, hands over her ears. Claire lunged for her, wrapping her arms around the small body and pulling her down under the table. "Close your eyes, sweetheart," Claire whispered urgently, pressing Sophia's face against her shoulder. "Don't look, don't listen, just stay with me." Above them, hell broke loose. Marco and Salvatore grappled on the floor, both fighting for control of the gun. 15 years of friendship evaporated in the violence between them. Salvatore landed a brutal punch to Marco's jaw. Marco responded by slamming Salvatore's hand against the floor until the gun skittered away. "Boss!" One of the capos moved to help. "Stay out of it," Marco roared. "He's mine!" The other men formed a circle, hands on their weapons but not interfering. This was personal, sacred, a betrayal so deep it could only be answered by Marco himself. Salvatore managed to roll free, scrambling for the dropped gun. His fingers closed around it, just as Marco kicked him in the ribs hard enough to crack bone. Salvatore gasped, but kept moving, raising the gun. Marco grabbed a dinner knife from the floor and slashed upward. Salvatore screamed as the blade opened a gash down his forearm. The gun dropped again, but Salvatore wasn't finished. He pulled a second weapon from his waist, this one larger, a 9mm, that had been hidden under his suit jacket. "You should have let her die," Salvatore shouted, blood dripping from his arm. "The family would have been stronger. You would have been stronger." He fired. The bullet caught Marco in the shoulder, spinning him around. Several capos drew their weapons, but Marco raised his hand, a clear command to stand down even as blood soaked his white shirt. "Guard!" someone shouted toward the door. The dining room doors flew open, and 6 security guards rushed in, weapons drawn, but they stopped at the carnage. The broken glass, the overturned furniture, their bleeding boss locked in combat with his second in command. No one interfere. One of the capos barked at them. Boss's orders. Marco charged at Salvatore despite his wounded shoulder, slamming him into the china cabinet. The crash was deafening. Porcelain exploded in all directions. Both men fell into the wreckage, trading brutal punches. Under the table, Claire held Sophia tighter, softly, singing in her ear a lullaby her grandmother used to sing. Anything to drown out the sounds of violence happening just feet away. Salvatore fought like a man possessed, knowing these were his final moments. He landed a vicious elbow to Marco's wounded shoulder, making the boss grunt in pain. Then he grabbed a shard of broken plate and slashed Marco's face. Marco caught his wrist, twisting until bones broke. Salvatore howled. "You poisoned my daughter," Marco said, his voice cold and final. "You looked me in the eye every day while you murdered my blood. I was trying to save you." Salvatore gasped. "You killed yourself the moment you touched her." Marco wrenched the gun from Salvatore's weakened grip. In one fluid motion, he pressed the barrel to Salvatore's forehead and fired. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Salvatore's body went limp, his eyes staring at nothing. Marco stood slowly, breathing heavily, covered in blood. Some his, most Salvatore's. He looked down at his oldest friend's body, his brother, in everything but blood, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "Let this be a lesson," Marco said, addressing the room, though his eyes never left Salvatore's corpse. "No one poisons my blood and lives. No one betrays this family and walks away. Loyalty is everything. Without it, you're nothing." The capos bowed their heads, a show of absolute submission and renewed loyalty. "Yes, boss," they murmured in unison. Marco finally looked away from Salvatore. "Someone clean this up. Get Dr. Patterson to look at my shoulder." Then his eyes found the overturned table where Claire and Sophia were hiding. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Claire, bring her out." Claire emerged slowly, Sophia still clinging to her arms. The girl's eyes were squeezed shut, her small body trembling. Marco knelt despite his wounded shoulder, reaching out to touch his daughter's face. "Sophia, it's over. You're safe now." Sophia opened her eyes, saw her father's bloodied face and broke into tears, but they weren't tears of fear. They were relief. She reached for Marco, and father and daughter embraced as Claire stepped back, giving them space. Around them, guards began removing Salvatore's body. The nightmare was finally over. The sun rose over the Romano estate 3 days later, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Claire stood in the doorway of Sophia's room, watching the girl sleep peacefully for the first time since she'd arrived. No monitors, no desperate doctors, no poison running through her small body. Just a child breathing steadily, dreaming whatever 8-year-olds dream. She herself had barely slept. The image of Salvatore's final moments played on repeat every time she closed her eyes. She'd seen a man die, watched Marco execute his oldest friend without hesitation. This was the world she'd stumbled into. This was the price of saving a life. "You're up early." Claire turned to find Marco in the hallway, his arm in a sling from the shoulder wound. He looked tired, but somehow lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. "Couldn't sleep," Claire admitted. "I keep thinking about everything. First time witnessing something like that. First time being the reason for something like that." Claire's voice was quiet. "If I hadn't exposed him, he would have kept poisoning my daughter until Sophia died." Marco interrupted. "You saved her twice. Once from the poison, once from the poisoner. Don't carry guilt that belongs only to Salvatore." They stood in silence for a moment, watching Sophia sleep. "The other families will hear about this," Marco said finally. "They'll know there was a traitor in my inner circle. Some will see it as weakness. Others will see it as strength, that I dealt with betrayal swiftly and personally." "How do you see it?" Claire asked. Marco's jaw tightened. "A reminder that trust is earned, not given, and that the most dangerous enemies are the ones who sleep under your roof." Sophia stirred, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw Claire, her whole face lit up. "Claire!" She sat up quickly, reaching for her. Claire moved to her bedside, checking her forehead for fever out of habit. "Good morning, sweetheart. How do you feel?" "Good. Really good." Sophia looked between her and her father. "Is it really over? Am I really safe now?" Marco sat on the edge of the bed, his good hand resting on Sophia's shoulder. "You're safe. I promise you no one will ever hurt you like that again. Because of Claire." Sophia threw her arms around her, hugging her tight. "She saved me. She's like Aunt Claire." The title hung in the air. Simple, innocent, profound. Claire felt tears sting her eyes. Aunt Claire. "I like that." Then it settled. Marco said something warm in his usually cold voice. "Your family now." Later that morning, Marco called Claire to his office. A massive room with dark wood paneling and walls lined with books that probably had never been read. He sat behind an enormous desk, looking every bit the powerful boss he was. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a leather chair across from him. Claire sat, her hands folded in her lap. Marco pushed a folder across the desk. "That's the deed to a house in Westchester. 4 bedrooms, good school district for your daughter. It's yours, free and clear." Claire opened the folder, staring at the paperwork in disbelief. "There's also a bank account in your name," Marco continued. $500,000 to start. More will be added monthly. You'll never have to work 3 jobs again. Rachel will have everything she needs. "Mr. Romano." "Marco," he corrected. "You've earned the right to call me Marco." Claire closed the folder and pushed it back across the desk. "I can't accept this." Marco's eyebrows rose. "Why not?" "Because Sophia still needs me." Her voice was firm. "You can give me all the money in the world. Put me in a mansion, but that girl just went through hell. She needs stability, routine. Someone she trusts watching over her. I have staff for that." Staff didn't save her. Staff didn't notice she was being poisoned. Claire leaned forward. "I'm not asking for wealth or luxury. I'm asking to stay here in the kitchens doing what I do best. Let me supervise her meals. Let me ensure every ingredient that enters this house is safe. Let me be the person she can count on." Marco studied her for a long moment. "You want to be a kitchen worker when you could have a mansion." "I want to be the person who keeps your daughter alive," Claire said simply. "Everything else is just noise." For the first time since they'd met, Marco laughed, a real, genuine laugh. "You're the strangest woman I've ever met, Claire Bennett." "I'll take that as a compliment." It is Marco stood extending his hand. "All right, you stay. You watch over Sophia. You ensure she's safe, but the house and the money are yours anyway for Rachel. For your future, Consider it payment for a debt I can never truly repay." Claire shook his hand. "Thank you." Dawn came the next morning, and Claire found herself on the balcony outside Sophia's room. The girl stood beside her in pajamas, her small hand wrapped in hers, watching the sun rise over the horizon. "It's beautiful," Sophia said softly. "It is," Claire agreed. "Every sunrise is a gift, a chance to start over." "Are you really staying forever and ever?" Claire squeezed her hand gently. "As long as I breathe, no harm will come to you again. That's a promise." Behind them, the balcony door opened. Marco stepped out, coffee in his good hand, watching the two of them silhouetted against the golden light. He'd lost his oldest friend, discovered betrayal in his own house, nearly lost his daughter. But standing there watching Claire protect Sophia with the fierce devotion of a mother, Marco realized something. Sometimes the people who save you aren't the ones you expect. Sometimes they're just delivery drivers with gentle hearts and grandmother's wisdom. Sometimes they're exactly what you need. "Thank you," Marco said quietly. Though neither Claire nor Sophia had heard him, the words weren't for them anyway. They were for whoever was listening. Fate, God, the universe, for sending this woman into his life at exactly the right moment, for giving him a second chance, for reminding him that not everyone in this world wanted something from him. Some people like Claire Bennett just wanted to help. And in Marco Romano's dark world, that was the rarest gift of all. Life on the Romano estate settled into a new routine in the following days. Claire became a constant presence in the kitchens, overseeing every ingredient that entered every meal prepared for Sophia. Chef Mario initially resisted having someone watching over his shoulder, but quickly realized Claire wasn't there to question his authority, only to protect the girl they'd both come to love. Sophia improved with each passing day. Color returned to her cheeks. Her laughter echoed through the mansion's hallways. She followed Claire everywhere, a constant shadow, learning to cook, learning about herbs, listening to stories about Claire's grandmother she'd never meet but already admired. "Tell me again about how Grandma Rose healed your cousin Sophia," would beg every night when Claire tucked her into bed. And Claire would tell the story one more time, watching Sophia's eyes grow heavy until she fell asleep safe and protected for the first time in months. Marco watched it all from a distance. His shoulder healed slowly, the bullet having passed clean through, but leaving a scar he'd carry forever, a physical reminder of the betrayal that almost cost him everything. The other families had indeed heard about Salvatore. Some sent feelers testing whether Marco was weak and vulnerable. They learned quickly he wasn't. If anything, he was more dangerous now, more focused, more ruthless with anyone who tried to test his control. But in the quiet hours of night, when family business was handled and the mansion was still, Marco found himself thinking not about power or territory, but about the delivery driver who'd refused his fortune to stay and protect a child who wasn't even hers. It was unsettling. In his world, everyone had a price. Everyone wanted something. But Claire Bennett kept proving she was different. A week after Salvatore's death, Marco found Claire in the kitchen late at night. She was preparing chamomile tea for Sophia, who'd had a nightmare. "Don't you sleep?" Marco asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Could ask you the same thing," Claire replied without looking up. She poured hot water over the dried chamomile flowers, the calming scent filling the air. "I have business that keeps me awake. And you. I have an 8-year-old girl who's still processing watching her father kill a man in front of her." Claire's voice was gentle but firm. "She's going to have nightmares for a while. I want to be there when she wakes up." Marco entered the kitchen, pouring himself coffee even though it was past midnight. "I don't regret it. I don't expect you to regret it," Claire said quietly. "I just hope you understand Sophia's going to need more than physical protection. She's going to need time and patience and someone to help her understand the world can still be safe. She has you," Marco said. "She has both of us," Claire corrected. "You're her father, Marco. She needs you too, not just as the boss, but as dad." They stood in silence for a moment, the only sound being the tea steeping in the cup. "You remind me of my sister," Marco said suddenly. Claire looked up, surprised. "I didn't know you had a sister." "I don't. Not anymore." Marco stared at his coffee, his jaw tight. She died when I was 22. Cancer. She always told me that being powerful meant nothing if you lost your humanity in the process. I'm sorry for your loss, Claire said. She sounds like she was wise. Marco took a sip of coffee. When Sophia was born, I promised myself I'd raise her differently, that I'd keep her safe from the world I live in. But somehow the danger came from inside my own house. Salvatore made his choices, Claire said. You couldn't have known. A good boss should have known. Marco hit the counter lightly, should have seen the signs, paid closer attention. You're human, Claire said. Even Mafia bosses are human. You trusted someone you loved, and he betrayed that trust. That's not your fault, that's his. Marco looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in days. This woman who'd burst into his world and turned everything upside down. This woman who refused to be intimidated or bought or impressed by his power. This woman who saw through all his defenses straight to the terrified father underneath. Why do you do this? He asked. Why do you stay? Why do you care so much? Claire picked up the teacup and turned to leave. At the door she paused. Because when I was 12, she said quietly, my grandmother taught me that some things are worth more than money or safety. She taught me that when you see a child in danger, you don't walk away no matter how scared you are. She taught me that family isn't about blood, it's about who you choose to love and protect. She looked back at him. Sophia chose to love me, and I chose to love her back. It's that simple. After she left, Marco stood in the empty kitchen for a long time, staring at his cooling coffee. For the first time in years, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than power and control and fear. Maybe there was room for something softer, too. 3 weeks after Salvatore's death, an unexpected delivery arrived. A black car pulled up to the Romano estate, and a woman stepped out with a small red-haired girl. Claire was in the kitchen when Maria came running. Miss Bennet, there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. Who is it? Claire asked, confused. A woman with a child, Maria said. She wouldn't give her name, but said you'd know her. Claire's heart jumped. Rachel. She ran to the entrance, and there, standing nervously in the grand foyer, was her daughter. Mommy Rachel shouted, running to her. Claire scooped her up, spinning her around and holding her tight, feeling tears stream down her face. My baby, what are you doing here? Mrs. Chen brought me. The older woman stepped forward, bowing respectfully. Sorry, Miss Bennet. I know you said to keep Rachel at home, but she was so worried. She wasn't eating right, wasn't sleeping. She kept crying that her mommy was never coming back. I thought maybe if she saw you. It's okay, Claire said, still holding Rachel. Thank you for bringing her. What is this place? Mommy Rachel pulled back, looking around the mansion with wide eyes. Where are we? It's a very big house, Claire said. It's where I'm working now. You work in a castle, Rachel gasped. Sophia's going to think you're a princess. Who's Sophia? A small voice asked. Everyone turned to see Sophia standing on the staircase, wearing a pink dress, her hands shyly gripping the railing. That's my daughter, Claire said. Rachel, this is Sophia. Sophia, this is my daughter, Rachel. The two girls looked at each other with the curious wariness of children meeting potential friends. You have pretty hair, Rachel said. Thank you, Sophia said, coming down the stairs. Yours is like fire. Rachel smiled. Mommy says it's like her grandma's. Do you want to see my room? Sophia asked suddenly. I have a dollhouse that's bigger than me. Rachel looked at Claire, who nodded. The two girls ran upstairs, their laughter echoing through the halls. Marco appeared from the hallway, having heard the commotion. He looked at Claire, then at Mrs. Chen, then at where the girls had disappeared. So that's Rachel, he said. That's Rachel, Claire confirmed. I'm sorry. I know I didn't check with you first, but... It's fine, Marco interrupted. Actually, thinking about it, maybe it's time Rachel met, where her mother's living. He looked at Mrs. Chen. You're welcome to stay for dinner too. We appreciate your kindness in caring for Claire's daughter. Mrs. Chen bowed deeper, clearly intimidated but flattered. You're very kind, sir. That night the Romano mansion had a different kind of dinner. There were no capos or criminal associates, just Marco and Sophia and Claire and Rachel and Mrs. Chen around a table, eating the homemade food Claire had prepared with Sophia's help. The two girls chatted excitedly, already instant friends, despite knowing each other for only hours. They talked about their schools, their favorite teachers, the books they loved. Rachel told Sophia about her small public school in Detroit. Sophia told Rachel about her private tutors, but how she wished she could go to a real school with other children. Marco watched it all, a strange expression on his face. Claire caught him staring several times, but every time their eyes met, he looked away quickly. After dinner, while Mrs. Chen took Rachel to the bathroom and the girls ran off to play, Marco pulled Claire aside. "Your daughter is welcome to stay," he said. "Not just to visit, to live here, with you." Claire blinked, surprised. "Marco, I can't ask." "You're not asking," Marco said. "I'm offering. Look at them." He gestured to where Sophia and Rachel could be heard laughing upstairs. "Sophia's never had a real friend. All the children she knows are daughters of associates, people who want something from me. But your daughter, she's genuine. She makes Sophia happy." "And you think Rachel would be safe here?" Claire asked. "In the world you live in. She'd be safer here than anywhere else," Marco said. "You saw what happens when someone tries to hurt my family." He paused. "And you're my family now. Both you and Rachel. That is, if you'll accept." Claire looked at him, this dangerous man who'd killed without hesitation, this man who controlled a criminal empire, but who'd also just offered his home and protection to a child he barely knew because it would make his daughter happy. "How do I refuse an offer like that?" she said softly. "You don't refuse," Marco said with a small smile. "And maybe it's time Sophia had a real school too. A private one with heavy security where both girls can go together. What do you think?" "I think you're going soft," Claire teased. Marco laughed, a real full laugh that transformed his entire face. "Maybe I am," he said, "but don't tell anyone. It would ruin my reputation." 2 months later, the Romano estate had transformed into something unexpected. It had become a home. Rachel had officially moved in, bringing her few belongings from their tiny apartment. Mrs. Chen visited regularly, becoming a grandmother figure to both girls. Sophia and Rachel attended the same private school, walking together, laughing together, counting on each other, in ways only best friends can. Claire still oversaw the kitchen, still ensured every meal of Sophia's was safe. But now, she also helped Rachel with homework, read to both girls at bedtime, sang her grandmother's lullabies until they fell asleep. Marco watched his daughter flourish. The pale, sickly girl had disappeared, replaced by a vibrant child full of energy and joy. And though he'd never admit it out loud, he knew it wasn't just because the poison had been stopped. It was because Sophia finally had what every child needed, a family that loved her unconditionally. One afternoon, Marco found Claire and the girls in the garden. Sophia and Rachel were making daisy chains, while Claire showed them how to braid the stems together. He joined them, sitting on the grass, not caring about his expensive suit. "Daddy, can you help me?" Sophia asked, offering him flowers. Marco took the daisies, awkwardly trying to copy what Claire was doing. His large, rough hands that had broken bones and pulled triggers, now struggling to weave delicate flower stems. The girls laughed at his clumsy attempts, and to Claire's surprise, Marco laughed with them. This, Claire realized, was what change looked like. Not dramatic, not sudden, just a dangerous man sitting on grass with children learning to make daisy chains as if it were the most important thing in the world. That evening, after the girls were in bed, Claire found Marco in his office looking over documents. She knocked on the open door. "Can I come in?" "Always," Marco said, pushing the papers aside. "Everything okay?" Claire asked, sitting down. "You seem worried." "Not worried," Marco said, "just thinking about Salvatore, about how I missed the signs, about how I almost lost everything." "But you didn't lose it," Claire said gently. "Sophia's here. She's healthy and happy and safe. You won, Marco." "It doesn't feel like victory," Marco said quietly. "It feels like luck. Luck that you were making that delivery. Luck that you heard Sophia scream. Luck that you cared enough to do something, if any of those things hadn't happened." "But they did," Claire interrupted. "And you can't live in the what-ifs. You can only live in what is." And what is that you have a second chance. A chance to be the father Sophia needs. A chance to build something better than fear and power. Are you going to take it? Marco looked at her, this woman who'd become so essential to his life in such a short time. I'm trying, he said. Every day, I'm trying to be better than I was. For Sophia, for Rachel, for you. Then that's enough, Claire said. Nobody's asking for perfection, Marco. They're just asking for love, and I see you loving your daughter in all the ways that matter. Marco stood walking to the window, looking out over the moonlit grounds. When I was young, he said, my father taught me that love was weakness, that caring too much about anyone made you vulnerable. So I built this life, these walls around myself. I thought if I was strong enough, powerful enough, nothing could hurt me. But then Sophia was born, he continued, and I realized my father was wrong. Love isn't weakness. It's the only thing worth protecting. Everything else, power, territory, respect, is empty without it. Claire joined him at the window, standing beside him in companionable silence. Your grandmother was wise, she said finally. Those remedies she taught you, they saved my daughter. But she taught you more than just remedies, didn't she? Yes, Claire said. She taught me that healing comes from many places. Medicine, yes, but also love and patience and refusing to give up even when things seem impossible. She taught me that sometimes saving someone means just staying, just being present, just caring. Marco turned to her. I don't know how to thank you, he said, for everything you've done, for everything you continue to do. You don't need to thank me, Claire said. Seeing Sophia happy, seeing her play and laugh and just be a child again, that's thanks enough. They stood there at the window, watching the night shadows move across the gardens, and for the first time in years, Marco Romano felt something he thought he'd lost. Peace. The months turned into a year. The Romano estate thrived not just as a center of power, but as a home. Claire and Rachel became permanent fixtures in the family, not through blood, but through choice. Sophia celebrated her 9th birthday with a party where Rachel was the guest of honor. The two girls blew out candles together, making wishes they kept secret, but which Claire suspected had to do with always staying together. Marco watched his daughter grow strong and confident. The nightmares faded. Laughter came more easily. And though she never completely forgot what had happened with Salvatore, she learned that the world could still be safe, could still be good. The other families stopped testing Marco. They saw he wasn't weakened by Salvatore's loss, but strengthened by it. He made decisions more wisely now, thought more carefully about who he trusted. And when other bosses visited, they often found not the brutal tyrant they expected, but a man who served tea prepared by Claire, who talked about his daughter's report cards, who clearly loved his family above all else. It was unsettling to them, but it was who Marco had become. One afternoon, a year after that first fateful day, Claire found a letter on her pillow. It was from the private school Sophia and Rachel attended. Dear Miss Bennet, the letter read, we would like to invite you to speak at our career day about your work as an herbalist. Several students have expressed interest in alternative medicine, and we believe your unique story would be inspiring. Claire laughed, showing the letter to Marco that evening. They want me to talk about being an herbalist, she said. I'm not even a real herbalist. I just learned from my grandmother. You saved my daughter, Marco said. That makes you real enough. You should do it. The children should know that healing comes from many places, not just hospitals and doctors. So Claire agreed. And on a sunny spring morning, she stood before a room of young students and told her story. Not the part about the Mafia or Salvatore or the danger, but the part about her grandmother who taught her that everyone has the power to heal if they just care enough to try. The students listened, fascinated. Afterward, several came to ask questions. One young girl with bright eyes asked, Miss Bennet, did you always know you wanted to help people? Claire thought for a moment. No, she said honestly. For a long time I was just trying to survive, trying to pay bills and feed my daughter and make it to the next day. But then I learned that sometimes the most important things we do aren't planned. Sometimes you just hear someone scream and you can't walk away. And that choice, that one choice to stay and help, can change everything. The girl nodded thoughtfully. "What if you're scared?" the girl asked. "Then you do it anyway," Claire said gently. "Courage doesn't mean not being scared. It means being terrified but doing what's right anyway." When Claire returned to the Romano estate that afternoon, Sophia and Rachel ran to meet her. "How was it?" Rachel asked. "It was good," Claire said, hugging both girls. "But you know what? I'm glad to be home." Because this, she realized with sudden clarity, was home now. Not the tiny apartment in Detroit. Not the delivery truck where she'd spent her hours. But here, with these two girls, and this unlikely man who'd become more than a boss, who'd become family. That night at dinner, Marco made an announcement. "I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations," he said. "Putting trusted managers in place. That means I'll be home more, a lot more." Sophia jumped from her chair and leaped into his arms. "Really, Daddy, really, really," Marco said, kissing her hair. "I've learned there are things more important than business, and I've spent too much time away from the people I love." Claire caught his gaze over Sophia's head and smiled. Marco returned the smile, and in that moment an understanding passed between them. They'd both been saved that first day. Sophia from death, yes, but Marco from a life built on nothing but power and fear, and Claire from an existence where she was always just surviving, never truly living. Now they were all truly living. The years passed. Sophia and Rachel grew up together more like sisters than friends. They went to high school together, then college. Sophia studied law, wanting to change the family from within. Rachel studied medicine, inspired by Claire's healing stories. Marco gradually exited the criminal life, transforming his businesses into legitimate ventures. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't fast. But he made it happen because he'd promised his daughter he'd build something she could be proud of. Claire opened a small clinic on the estate grounds where she taught others about herbal medicine. Students came from across the country to learn from her, and every time she taught, she thought about her grandmother and how a simple set of lessons passed down through generations had saved not just one life, but an entire family. On the 15th spring after that first fateful day, Claire stood in the same garden where she'd once taught Sophia and Rachel to make daisy chains. But now she wasn't alone. Marco stood beside her, his hair greyed, but his eyes still sharp, and around them Sophia and Rachel, now grown young women, but still laughing together, still best friends after all these years. "This garden," Marco said quietly, "has the best memories." Claire agreed. "It's where I learned," she said, "that families aren't born, they're grown. Like flowers, you plant the seeds with love, you water them with patience, you protect them from storms. And if you're lucky, they grow into something beautiful." Marco took her hand, something he did now without hesitation. "Thank you," he said, "for that day, for every day since, for showing me there was another way to live." Claire squeezed his hand back. "Thank you for letting me stay," she replied, "for making Rachel and me part of your family, for giving me a home." They watched Sophia and Rachel walk together through the garden, their heads tilted together as they talked about their dreams for the future. And Claire thought about that day 15 years ago, when she heard a child scream and made the choice not to walk away. That choice had changed everything, saved Sophia, transformed Marco, gave Rachel a family, and gave Claire a purpose greater than she'd ever imagined. Sometimes she thought the most important things begin with the simplest acts. A scream heard, a hand extended, a decision to care when it would be easier to walk away. And sometimes those simple things turn into miracles. The sun set over the Romano estate, casting everything in golden light, and Claire knew, without any doubt, that she was exactly where she was meant to be, home. Not because it was luxurious or safe or comfortable, though it was all those things, but because it was filled with love and the kind of family you choose and that chooses you back. The kind that stays through nightmares and danger. The kind that turns strangers into sisters and mafia bosses into fathers. The kind that proves day after day that healing comes from many places, but the most powerful is always love. And as night fell over the gardens, Claire smiled, knowing her grandmother would have been proud, not just because she saved a life, but because she built a home.